Manchester United won, Arsenal won. The game's just finished at Old Trafford. Joining me to go over events in Manchester, Janusz Michallik. I want to start right at the end. It was nearly 2-1 Manchester United, practically the last kick of the ball. Bruno Fernandez, but a good save from David Raya. That meant the end of the chances. Overall, after a pretty poor first half, we actually had a decent spectacle in this one, didn't we?
Yeah, we did a number of chances. You have to say, I mean, with all the negative things that we can say, and we've been saying about Manchester United, right? It almost seemed to me ahead of the game that they've thrown in a towel, not just the results, but what's happening with the protests and just what's happening around the club. So much negativity and not much to look forward to. And yet today, as we've said, take that first half aside, although obviously, goal and the second half was outstanding. And if it wasn't for Raya, I mean, we had unbelievable chances there, right? I mean, you're talking about the one from Bruno before that. Remember Declan Rice, the last ditch tackle on Højlund, then Mazraoui. Remember when Dalot crossed that ball? That's close to being a sitter, right? I mean, great save. And even Zirkzee, that backheel flick, those are just few that I've written it down that I wanted to remember. So certainly Manchester United, short of saying put on a show, but they haven't given up and they're looking for the momentum. And by the way, I almost want to talk about the positives of Manchester United today.
Sure.
And, the ones that we've just said, and that built a momentum.
It did, and it seemed that there was a kind of togetherness about them in the second half, whether it was young Heaven coming on for Lenny Yoro at halftime from Arsenal, of course. They signed him in January. But you just got that impression, before we get on to all the positives and everything that happened in the second half, and even Bruno Fernandez's free kick, you just got the impression in that first half, it's two teams, never mind Arsenal needing a striker, but it's two teams that need a striker, because Højlund, again, no service to him. And then when he did have a chance in the second half, as you quite rightly said, Declan Rice with the tackle, he's just so devoid of confidence. But thankfully, in the second half, we got something. And that was after Bruno Fernandez had opened the scoring from a free kick. Now, watching the game, partly in the US and partly the British coverage as well, it came to light at halftime that Sky TV's coverage in the UK showed that the wall was back 11.2 yards. Now, it should be back 10 yards, okay? So how much blame are we putting on David Raya here, who starts his starting positions to the right near the post? He then takes a step before Bruno hits it and then can't get across in time. A wall that's too far back, or just a brilliant technique from a brilliant footballer?
I think a little bit of everything, because we remember Manchester United were dealing with that distance as well. Remember Bruno Fernandez just keep telling the referee that it was far away as well. So I suppose you have to do enough to make sure that doesn't happen, right? I mean, I don't want to put that on the goalkeeper, on the free kick that Bruno scored in terms of distance. In terms of his positioning, yes, it looked like he was far to his right. He took a couple of steps. Even during the commentary, we were talking about how big that wall was from Arsenal, right? And you have to trust it. But at the end of the day, you see that pace and quality from Bruno Fernandes. Let's not forget, just recently he did that against Everton, if memory serves right. So he certainly is the absolute leader of Manchester United, the only player that never gives up. We've questioned his leadership in the past. I've done it, by the way, as well. I feel a little bit silly because what he has shown since then. And that was, I think, last season when we were talking about his body language and all that, not about his quality, Mark. But I think we've had these conversations, you and I. I know you've asked me that numerous occasions. And I think he's just carrying this team. And you could see it. You could sense it. His body language has changed. And it's amazing that at a time like this, where everything is going south for Manchester United, he hasn't given up. Because you know what? I don't want to say he has the right to it, but there comes a time where every player kind of, says, there's nothing we can do here. So fair play to him, fair play to United on that goal. I'm just going to give it to Bruno Fernandes. I mean, you can always do a little bit better if you're Arsenal, but you can't take that away from him.
No, and we shouldn't. It was a brilliant free kick, regardless of how far back the wall was. You got it up, you got it down. It was the technique, and it's the ability to kind of put topspin that increases the velocity of the ball. It was a brilliant free kick. And Manchester United went ahead. Now, here's something I didn't know, and I'm going to tell you, even though you might not want to know.
I think I've written it down.
1984?
Are you talking about never losing when I had at halftime? That's 305 games. I was ready for you, my friend. I was ready.
That's good. That's good. Manchester United has not lost a game in the league when leading at halftime at Old Trafford since 1984. Well, and they didn't today.
Never in the Premier League. Never in the Premier League history.
Never in the Premier League. Going back to 1984 was the last time in the top flight that it happened. So they needed to concede 2. They didn't. They conceded 1. So what kind of response did we get from Arsenal in this one? It wasn't even an hour on the clock when they took off Calafiori and they took off Waneri, and Martinelli made a difference.
Yes, he did. I mean, if you look at Arsenal, I mean, they certainly, the goal from Bruno Fernandez was against the run of play, for sure. I mean, Arsenal were the better team. They were dictating the proceedings there. But, I can't seem to remember a good chance in the first half that Arsenal created, really, right? Really? So, I mean, so it's that, I mean, we can look back and talk about what happened in Eindhoven and, the number of goals with the type of players that they're missing, different competition. I think you and I probably will get to that because there's a massive psychological difference. It seems to me between the Premier League now and Champions League for Arsenal, they've gotten better. They had their chances. Declan Rice, I mean, did it at both ends. I've mentioned the tackle he's put in at 1-1, and of course, superbly taken a goal from him. He knew exactly what he was doing from good 15, 16 yards off the post. That's wonderful. He's such a great player. And there's so many great players, but unfortunately for Arsenal, Mark, I've said it before, not as an excuse, but no team can deal without so many quality players being out. You just can't do that. And maybe what you said is right. Look at Martinelli came in after such a long time and made a difference right away. Imagine if Saka, Gabriel Jesus, you have options. You have different options that you can introduce to the game. So, but the bottom line, Mark, this is what happens when you're done in terms of the title. It does, and I don't, you look back at the draws against was it Forest, the loss to West Ham. I just think that not that they play like that, but you just know that the title is done. And Arsenal, unfortunately, has to fight hard to make sure they finish second or third or fourth. I mean, it's not that, teams are not that far away from them.
No, and they're 15 points behind now, Liverpool. Forget that. That ain't happening. I want to talk about Declan Rice. So Arsenal had a really good win over Manchester City. Had a really good win over over PSV away from home, scoring 5, then scoring 7. Now, in between time, in 3 of the 4 games, they didn't score. So being a nerd and being a geek, I read a tactical piece and kind of average position piece on Arsenal following the game against PSV. And what the main crux of what I read was that Declan Rice's starting position was more advanced against PSV. They've already got a little bit of security in front of the defence, so it looks like they pushed Declan Rice a little bit further forward against PSV. Obviously did well in that game, like he normally does, but he was more advanced today as well, and he got back. The importance of Declan Rice to be in that position, because it wasn't the first time today when he scored the goal that he was in a similar position. What difference can that make in football, Janusz, when you've got someone as talented as he is, maybe just playing on average 5-10 yards further up the park?
Yeah, I just think that he's always plays like that. Declan Rice starting position in my book is everywhere. I mean, he is everywhere. He does what he needs to do, and he's such a player that I mean, as far as physicality or physically, he can do that. So if he's asked sometimes to play deeper, that's usually only because of some major injuries. If I remember, way back when, or at West Ham, or even in the beginning at Arsenal, is when you don't have Partey, when you didn't have Jorginho or anybody else, sometimes you're forced to play him there. But even if he was told at some stage, I'm not talking about today, to play deeper, he always gets involved. He always makes those late runs. That's one player that I never ever question in my life. I think at West Ham or at Arsenal, he's absolutely superb. There's no questions about that. So I mean, he's got all the tools to play like he does play. And even when Arsenal struggle, Declan Rice is always there as one of the best, if not the best, or most consistent player on the pitch.
I mentioned right at the start the chance right at the end for Bruno Fernandez. Now, it didn't go in. It was saved well by David Raya, and he was able to keep it out at the second attempt. But by that stage, Aidan Heaven had come on at halftime for Lenny Yoro. Toby Collier had come on as well. Are we now at a stage for Manchester United, Europa League aside, right? They put their strongest lineup there. Is the Premier League now an opportunity for Manchester United, who've got some really talented kids and talented youngsters at the football club, to say, okay, let's try and use them a little bit more. Let's give them the experience that they might not get if they were challenging for whether it's Europa League or the league title? Or is there still that concern, look, you can overdo it with the number of youngsters, given the situation Manchester United find themselves in?
I mean, he can't overdo it. He has no choice. I mean, there's nobody, even Euro now. We saw he had discomfort. He somehow lasted through halftime, right? Then he came off. I don't know how long he's going to be out with that. But if you look at on the bench, I mean, that's all you have. So he's got no choice. Yeah. And, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And there's no danger in bringing any of these players during the Premier League, even if he recovers some players. Because he's going to make massive amount of changes, right? So I look at it, not that I want to jump back to Arsenal, but I mean they're not in a horrible position, right? I mean they've lost a lot of players, but who knows if a player, say like Nwaneri, would have ever gotten a number of chances to show how good he is if everyone was healthy at Arsenal, right? If Saka was there, yeah, Nwaneri would have been coming in, but a lot less, that's for sure. And now Mikel Arteta, for example, knows that he's an unbelievable option from the start. He's gaining experience. So going back to Manchester United, you're going to have the same situation. Collier's been coming in, and he looks okay. So that's a player that obviously, you're going to keep given the resources of Manchester United, and hopefully they're going to benefit from that. Harry Amasa, I mean, you and I think it was with you. We were talking when Manchester United were on the tour here in the United States in the preseason. He looked the part. He looked very, very good. And that left back, well, I don't know if he's going to be a wing back, but he can, right? I mean, with Luke Shaw and everything that we know that's happening over there, he may be a very good option. So absolutely, I think. But, this today for Manchester United, even with the draw, I mean, it would have been much better with the 3 points, but it was, I think, the way they play in the second half, a momentum gainer, right, Mark? Because think about that.
Well, it was.
That big carrot, the only carrot that exists, and it's a massive one for Manchester United, is Europa League, Mark, isn't it? I mean,
get some into Champions League if they win it.
Right. Think about it. With everything that has gone wrong, they're nowhere near a top 4 or 5 places. So, they may get that. And here we are, a great draw away at Sociedad. Say they get through it, probably Olympique Lyonnais. I think they won 3-1 away against Tawa. So, we're talking quarterfinals. Mm-hmm. As unlikely as that sounds, a game like this today, even though a draw with the way they play in the second half, gives you some hope. It gives you momentum.
Where does it leave Arsenal today?
As I've said, I think, for a long time now, they knew that the title had slipped away. Of course, this was the season that you think they were going to win it, and everybody thought about it. But then again, as I've said, you have 4 or 5 key players not being there. That's massive. Nobody can expect from any club that they can easily replace 4 key players. Take 4 players from any team around the world, and they struggle. No questions about that. But, the pressure will be next season or else. That's the last season, last season for Arteta, I don't know, but last season for them before you kind of lose hope, because it's not easy, right? Liverpool has fought Manchester City, came close a couple of times. One time, with crazy 90, whatever it was, Mark, I forget, 6, 7 points, whatever that was. But they eventually got it done. But there is a good team at Arsenal, Mark. There's a very good team. If the injury crisis aren't going to be bad, right? We saw what Arsenal were doing early in the season with all those healthy players. We've just talked about Declan Rice. We've talked about, look at even Raya today. Good enough for sure. The backline with Saliba and Gabriel, very, very good. Now you have Nwaneri. All of a sudden, now you look at differently at Saka, right? You can rotate there a little bit. You can have them rest. Nwaneri can play on the left-hand side. I trust that this time they're going to get a very good central striker. I mean, there's a very good team that's going to challenge it. Unfortunately, this was the year. Mark, this was the year. And that they're going to regret that, I don't know for how long. I mean, City down, Chelsea down, Manchester United down, Spurs down. I mean, how much more can you ask for? So I think this is a season to regret for sure, because nobody thought that Liverpool could do this.
So who's the blame on? Is it Arteta, or is it the board for not providing Arteta with a striker that he needs?
I think the striker would have been good because it was needed, and now it's an easy excuse that everybody goes to, right? Perception is reality with Arsenal. So everybody's going to talk about that, right? For the right reason. So that one, that's within the board. Arteta, I'm sure, wanted it. They should have done it. Would that have been enough? Who knows? With all those injuries that you have, I'm not 100% sure that, you still can get that. So, I mean, everybody gets injuries, but you hope that one season you're going to get less than others, right? I mean, you get Spurs with injuries, like Manchester United with injuries, you get Chelsea. I mean, Liverpool, obviously healthy, right? Take 4 players away from Liverpool. Take Salah away. PSG did that, and he was on the pitch. They took him away, but they found a way.
Final question. Who goes further in European competition this year? Arsenal in the Champions League, already pretty much through to the quarterfinals, or Manchester United in the Europa League?
Ooh. I still have to say that Arsenal has more quality, just in general.
Real Madrid or Atleti await.
Yeah, is the next game. I couldn't remember, right? I mean, for Manchester United, Olympique Lyonnais, that's not going to be easy. That's easy. For sure. But it's difficult to compare apples and oranges. I'm not saying that Olympique Lyonnais, is bad. I mean, incredible pedigree in the Champions League. Remember, Mark, when we first started working, that was an incredible team that provided the big teams with so many great players, right, later on. So I don't know if that's fair to compare, but now that you told me, because I couldn't remember that it's Real Madrid or Atleti, I don't know. I mean, there's so much talent, more talent than Arsenal. United are just going to continue to struggle from game to game because, as you said, who are they going to play? They may have to play some kids against Lyonnais.
Look, the bottom line is, for an Arsenal perspective, it was disappointing today. They didn't get the 3 points that they hoped for at Old Trafford. They could have lost all 3 points at the end of the game had it not been for David Raya. But they're now going to get Saka back after the international break for the next round of the Champions League. And Manchester United will hopefully get some players back as well to be in a stronger position. So we could still end up with Manchester United successful in the Europa League and getting into the Champions League. We could find out that Arsenal maybe find a way to get by Real Madrid or Atleti, or they both might get knocked out in the next round. So a lot of ums and ahs still to go.
Some momentum. I mean, for United, it's going to be difficult. For Arsenal, I guess it depends how you look at it. I mean, Arsenal fans will tell you differently maybe, and those that don't like Arsenal will tell you differently. Yeah. I kind of have to look at that and say to myself, look, if you're a fan of a club and that club gives you hope in the beginning of the season that you have a chance to win the title, right? That's a good thing. I mean, not many teams can say that realistically. Everybody says that, but I mean, from being 8 twice, now possibly 3 seasons, in second, there's that hope. I would like to be a fan of the club where I can say, yes, we're going to be fighting for the title. And I think Arsenal has done that. But again, I mean, at some stage, you have to do it.
It's the hope that kills you, huh? Bye for now.
You would know that, right?